Hello, everyone, and welcome to installment 3 of our Women in Music series here at Montgomery County Community College. And today, I have a very good friend and a person who has been in the business for a long time, and she's going to explain her journey in this business. Her name is Vanessa Ferrer, and she runs MerchCat, www.merchcat.com, and welcome.
Thank you for having me, David.
My pleasure.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here and share my journey and some insight on kind of what I went through on my path to music, and then kind of give some insight on what exactly MerchCat does and the thought process that I went through to create the platform, and then obviously answer any questions that I can that you guys might have on anything related to anything that I talk about or anything else. So with that, I'll get started. MerchCat is a platform for artists to sell and manage their merchandise at live shows. So it's a 2-app platform right now. One is a merchandise management app that artists use at their own merch table. And the other is a fan app where fans can go in and buy the merchandise and pick it up at the merch table, and it has a connected sales and inventory system. So I'll get into why that's really important later, but I'm just going to jump right into kind of my journey on how I came to actually be in music, because it was not a smooth one. I did not start out there, and hopefully it'll inspire anyone here and, kind of help you realize like that the path that you start out on may not always be the path that you end up on, and that's okay. So I was born in Staten Island. I was a child of divorced parents, and as an only child, I was always very creative and drawing and, kind of using my creativity as an outlet, and music was always a thing for me, but I just never knew what to do with it. I was always scoring high on aptitude tests. I was in like advanced classes as a child. And once I got into high school and got a taste of freedom, my free-spiritedness kind of took over. And I chose to leave, the academic focus and, be hanging out in the schoolyard and cutting out of class. And I pretty much went from having like a high 80s average in the first semester of freshman year of high school to almost failing by the end of the freshman year. So, I kind of had to check myself and say, okay, like, you want to do things with your life, so get yourself together and figure it out. So I found an interest in fashion design and art, and I would draw. And I took some classes at FIT in New York City on the weekends while I was in high school. And I thought I might go there for college. Here are some of my old drawings that I had for my portfolio. And my father basically said, no, you're not going to be or do anything creative. You're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, because I had always gotten good grades, and he wanted me to have a secure career, which, most fathers do want their daughters to have, the ability to stand on their own 2 feet. So I said, fine, I'll become an accountant. My mother was a controller in car dealerships, and it just seemed, the way to go, especially with my grades at that point. I really didn't have the grades to get into law school or go through that path. So I went to community college for 1 semester, and at the time, I mentioned before that my parents were divorced. I was living with my dad, and I haven't had an evil stepmother. And I decided that I didn't want to live there anymore, so I left and I moved up to Mahopac, New York with my mom. So that point in time was critical for me, because I had been, I grew up in Staten Island. I had lived there all of my life. That's where my security was and everything else. But I knew that I had to get out of there to kind of make a change and move forward in my life. So I moved up there and I went to Westchester Community College for 2 years. I majored in accounting. I had to take intermediate accounting, which is like a core class, twice, because obviously I loved it so much that I was doing so well at it. But eventually, and I had originally wanted to go to PACE for accounting, and I couldn't get in with my grades. So I went to community college, and then, I went through that accounting curriculum, which was mostly torture. In between all of this, I had, worked at Kraft Foods in the finance group while I was in college. Previously as a bank teller, car dealership. My first job was at McDonald's. I was working since I was 14. So I always kind of had this ebb and flow of discipline and, free-spirited kind of trying to rebel against, responsibilities and then pulling myself back into check. But eventually I did graduate with my BBA in public accounting. However, it was very competitive at Pace, and I couldn't get a job at any of the big firms because my GPA wasn't high enough, and I didn't do enough community service, whatever the reasons were. I didn't fit the mold. So I couldn't get a job at any of the good firms. So I settled for a smaller firm where I worked for 2 years, or maybe it was a year, for a husband and wife. Learned as much as I could, hands-on, probably did everything that somebody at a big firm would take years to do because they give them one task and they have to stick to it. And then I left and moved to a bigger firm. I eventually passed the CPA exam after many attempts of trying. Studying was torture. I remember sitting in the library looking out the window asking, why am I doing this? I just knew that the answer was that I had to stay the course and kind of create a secure career path for myself. So eventually I left the firm that I was at and got a job as a fund controller at a prominent private equity real estate investment firm. So I was very happy and felt like I had made, waves in my career, but I was still feeling unfulfilled. And after 4 years there, I decided that I wanted to be on the business side of real estate, where I would be out interacting with people, making deals, and be not sitting behind a computer 24/7. So my company agreed to send me to NYU for a graduate certificate program, and I did so well there that they let me continue, and I agreed to, and I eventually received my master's degree. However, while I was in grad school, I was skiing in Vermont, and I met a guy in a band who was signed to a New York City indie label, and I had always retained stuff about music and the music industry. And I didn't really know why. I just knew that I was passionate about it, but again, not knowing really how to channel that or what to do with it. So the band was signed to an indie label. The record was released. We kept in touch, and when the record was released, I found myself asking him, what radio stations are they marketing it to? How are they marketing? Are you guys going to go on tour? And ended up kind of jumping in to fill in the gaps because they had the father of the drummer co-managing with the father of the guitar player. They were on opposite coasts, and they would send out email blasts with 5 different fonts and broken links, listen to the band on this radio station, and you click the link and it wouldn't go anywhere. And, so I started jumping in to kind of help fill in the gaps. I started looking for show opportunities for them and, any way to really help expose the band that I could. And that, what we know today is artist management. So that's kind of really, and I loved it. I felt unlike anything else that I had done before, okay, this is how I can bridge my business experience at this point and my love of music. So, I watched that band ultimately implode because no one was looking out for the band's best interest. And that just really made me say, okay, here's a way that I can be impactful in music and help artists, fulfill their dreams and, kind of keep them in line with the business side. So I promised myself that once I graduated from NYU, I would focus on music. So there's me. So I graduated from NYU with a Master of Science in Commercial Real Estate Finance and Investment. It's a pretty competitive program. This time I was out with a 3.89 GPA, and what did I do? I decided to form an artist management company and take some classes at Berklee College of Music in artist management, music industry entrepreneurship, and the future of music. I also started taking guitar lessons. I formed the management company. That was something that Berklee had helped me focus on, what are your values, your vision, And, you know, your mission as a company, you know, getting a website together, having my own branding. And I knew that having all of that business experience, if I wanted to be taken seriously as an artist manager, I had to have the infrastructure together. So I worked to put together that infrastructure and started attending music-related events and just kind of holding myself out as a professional. Nobody knew that I was kind of moonlighting as a manager at that time. Nobody ever asked because I just held myself out as a serious, you know, professional. And that helped me start to kind of make my way a little bit. And, you know, it took time. It was a process. And I started, you know, dabbling and helping a few other artists on an informal basis, just doing different things, giving recommendations, like reaching out to radio for promo, stuff like that, just to kind of get my feet wet, you know, being hands-on. And then about a year later, I signed my first artist, who is a local cover band guy who wanted to have an original music career. So I worked with him through his branding process because by then it had already started to be known or said that the artist is a brand. So we went through the branding process, designing merch, picking out merch blanks, and deciding what price points we were going to sell at and that type of stuff. And then I also worked with him. The recording studio is not an unfamiliar thing to me. I worked with him through the recording process. I was the executive producer of his first record, and I was there for almost every session with him in the studio. And sometimes people don't like the managers being in the studio, but I was determined to be there since I was paying for it, which was stupid. Don't ever pay for if you ever go into artist management, don't lay out any money. It usually doesn't end well. But so through all of that, I was gaining, I was basically buying my education, and gaining my education in artist management firsthand, going through every single process with him, and also gaining reasons to talk to people in the music industry. So I started, I had gone to a couple events before, but now I joined the Music Business Association, and they used to be called NARM. Now they're called Music Biz. It's one of the biggest industry conferences that's in Nashville now every year. And those people know me pretty well, but I started going to those conferences, meeting people, kind of collecting resources, but also building relationships. And which, I'll say this again later in my closing thoughts, but it's really important not just to collect contacts in this industry. It's important to build relationships. Nobody wants an email from somebody that they've never met before or don't know saying like, hey, can you connect me with this person, or can you do this for me? Nobody wants that anymore. You need to build relationships and be genuine and like foster those like authentic connections with people, get them to believe in you, and then they'll want to help you. And that has been a huge thing for me along this whole path. So I was working with my artist, and then I met a higher profile artist that I started. He was in a band that was still active and touring, but he had a side project, and I started helping him with his side project, helping them, get some structure and create opportunities. And through that relationship, it led to other higher profile relationships, and it just starts to kind of spiral from there. And through the process of selling merch at shows for my artists, and making the merch and trying to figure out what was going on in the merch business was really when I started to come up with the idea for MerchCat, because there was really no way for an artist just to hit a button like when somebody bought an item. If they were already swiping a card, for that item to have, for the inventory to be recorded, for the show that it was being sold at to be recorded, like that timestamp, and for the inventory to be reduced. So, the thoughts started brewing at that point. I would ask other managers, like, what do you use to track inventory at shows? They would send me Excel spreadsheets. I sent the Excel spreadsheet to my artist and said, here, fill this out. He sent me back a Word document that said I sold 10 smalls at this show. He wasn't having it. A lot of people don't know how to use Excel, and that's fine. It's not part of usually, an artist's curriculum. Maybe today it is if you actually go to school, but for those who are just jumping in and going right into the playing and recording of music, Excel may not be like the forte. So I knew that there really needed to be, and there was something lacking that was intuitive for an artist or a creative's brain, where they could just, hit a button and all of the work could happen on the back end. So just hold that thought for a minute that, all right, the idea for Merch Cat started brewing. So at this point, I was doing 2 roles at my day job. I was a fund controller, and with my degree now, I had started doing asset management on some construction projects. So I was doing those 2 things, and I was managing on the side. And in my day job, I was getting the work done. Now I had the degree, but I was not getting any recognition for it. I was still branded as an accountant. I worked on the reconstruction of the Hyatt Hotel that's next to the Superdome that was devastated during Hurricane Katrina. And I was the asset manager on that project for my company. I was our eyes and ears. I made sure that the construction process kept going. I made sure that the contractors got paid. I made sure that the lender sent us our money. And so I was in the middle of all of that, making it happen and doing my other role at that firm, and I wasn't getting any recognition for it. And I could say that, I'm going to say this here in this forum, and obviously it's going on record, but commercial real estate is a man's world. And, when I was in NYU, I was one of like 3 females in classes of 30 people. So, and we had 1 female professional out of about 25 other than the accountants in my firm. So I was, kind of sitting there like saying, hey, I'm doing all this work, like, recognize me, move me to the business side, give me a raise, and most of it didn't happen. So, I started at that point, when I saw that I wasn't getting recognized for all of the work that I was doing, to start to say, okay, I went through all of this, like, I'm not getting recognized for anything. So maybe I should just go focus on music. And I started looking for jobs in the music industry, whether it be in finance or, whatever kind of piqued my interest. And I just started like throwing the resume out there. And then I don't really remember the exact timeline, but somewhere in this process, and I still had the idea for Merch Cat that was like written down, and, I was kind of dabbling in whether or not to do it. But I got called into my boss's office at my day job, and he said, okay, the company had gotten acquired, and he was like, you're going to go back to doing only accounting. So I had been 4 years doing asset management, and, he said, you're going to go back to doing only accounting, which was essentially a demotion, because the business side is a more esteemed side. You're the revenue drivers for the business. You get paid more. And so he was basically saying, okay, you're going back to sitting behind a desk 24/7. And I was like, no, I'm not. No, thank you. So I sent them a separation agreement saying, I've been here for 14 years or 13 years, whatever it was at that time. I'll help you, do whatever you need to do, but I am not going back to doing only accounting. Can we come to some kind of agreement? Just let me go, give me severance, do this or that. They ignored me, and 2 weeks later, they said that and I found out why, because they were outsourcing the accounting department. So basically, they pushed me back into the accounting department to then outsource me. And then they said, we have a job for you at the company we're outsourcing to, and if you don't take it, it's a voluntary resignation, which means no benefits, no unemployment. So basically forcing us to take the job that they wanted us to take so they would have continuity of information. And I was just like, yeah, no, that's not happening. So, I went to an employment attorney, and they were like, well, you could have a disparate treatment case, which means that because you're a female, or I guess in some cases a male, you're not being treated the same as the other gender. But they're like, if you bring a lawsuit, basically, if you ever want to work in this industry again, like, you're going to have a hard time because you're going to be known as like a troublemaker. So if you can negotiate with them, then try and negotiate with them. So I went back to them and I said, okay, here's the deal. I've been here for now at this point 14 years. I'll help you through your transition as a consultant, but I'm not going back to being an accountant and working for that outsourced company. and they agreed. It wasn't, I really didn't get anything like other than what I had already worked for it, but they agreed to keep me on as a consultant. And at that point, that's when I said, okay, I had come into some money from an investment that I had. And so I decided to build MerchCat. And that was the next step in the journey. Do we have any questions up to this point?
What year was this, like around what's the timeline in terms of, you know, what year is this where you're promoting Berkeley, blah, 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 like where
So in 2007, that's when I met Craving Lucy, which, yeah, so that's when the music started to, the music door started to open for me. And then in 2009, when I graduated, that's when I formed In Focus Artist Management, and in between there somewhere, I was just taking the Berkeley classes online after I graduated from NYU. So now, this is like 2014 when I left my firm. Through the music relationships that I had, I found the developers for MerchCat. And so I decided to proceed with doing that. And, basically the reasons that merchandise is so important, because it's one of the two ways that artists make real money in today's music industry. It takes about 3,400 streams on Spotify for an artist to make $15. They could sell one t-shirt and put $15 in their bank account that night. So you could see, it's a pretty compelling argument that merchandise is a very important part of the music business today. And it's really an untapped space. I mean, as far as the inventory management side, it's me and I think I have two competitors. There's lots of screen printers out there that are making the merchandise, but they're not geared towards artists. They don't understand that artists need low price points and low minimums. They can't afford to make 144 t-shirts at $10. They don't have that kind of money initially to outlay. And the reason that inventory management is so important is because 85% of merch sales take place at the live show when fans are emotionally engaged in the moment. So in order for artists to capture that, they really need to have, the inventory on hand that fans want, the sizes, the styles, or else they're going to be leaving money on the table. And, in the industry, people are still using Excel spreadsheets. They're using Square by itself. They're using PayPal by itself. They're still doing a manual tally. It blows my mind every time I find out that people are still using a pen and paper at their shows to keep track of what they're selling. And then do you think that they go back and ever do anything with that data? Probably not. They just wait till the box is empty and then they're like, oh shit, we need larges. I was just at a show a couple of weeks ago for a friend's band, and it was in a small record store, and the band had brought in their merch, and after, people were coming over to the merch table, and a couple of times people were asking for large, and I'm standing there watching the guy picking out every single t-shirt out of 3 boxes of merch to try and find the large, and guess what? They were out of larges. So he just wasted 5 or 10 minutes that he could have been engaging with a fan and talking to a fan or making the next sale. So, these are all of the reasons that I saw, and I mean, I'm still seeing, because not everybody knows about MerchCat yet. Even though we've been out since the end of 2015, it's, the struggle is real. It's just like a band takes a long time to break. Most bands that seem to appear overnight have really been working at it for 10 years. Everything takes time to gain traction, and nobody ever tells you how long it really takes, and so, to that I say, once you're out of here, or if you are working at stuff now, and you feel like it's not happening fast enough, it's happening exactly in the time frame that it's supposed to. It's going to take time, and that's something that you just have to kind of resolve to, and be persistent. So, with MerchCat, I said a cohesive product that's accessible to everyone, to the smallest artist who's only, selling a t-shirt and a CD, because it's important for that artist also to, keep track of inventory and know what the fans are buying and know when they're running out, because especially in that case, they don't have anything else to sell if they run out. So, the other product that was out there at the time that MerchCat launched was $60 a month. There's, not too many artists out there at the emerging level who want to or can afford to pay $60 a month for inventory management. So price accessibility was important to me, a clean interface where you can just touch buttons and not think about it. It kind of just does the work for you behind the scenes. And then continuity of information. So, sales to fans can be maximized when the fans are engaged. So I created MerchCat, which is a point of sale system. We have PayPal and Square as our payment system. So it goes right into the gateway, and it's real-time inventory tracking. So as soon as the sale is finished, the inventory is reduced. And you get a report that tells you what you sold at what show. There's other analytics that tell you like what your sales to date are by accounting period, what your average cart amount is, and what your remaining inventory is, which is probably one of the most important things that it does, because you're able to see, with enough time to reorder that you're running out of things, or just not spend the time digging through a box, because you could look at it and say, okay, we don't have any more of these. We know we don't have any more larges. So, this is basically what the interface looks like. It's clean. It has the analytics, so it's intuitive on the front end and informative on the back end. And these metrics aren't necessarily updated, but we launched on December 1st, 2015. We think we found our market, but to tell you the truth, we've had everyone from the smallest artist to a Marshall Tucker band was just using it. George Clinton and the Parliament Funkadelic was using it. We've had bigger artists look into using it. So this tells me that there's still a whole market out there that's not being serviced, by any one product. We've processed almost 500,000 merch sales to date. We've completed our trademark registration, so we're a registered trademark. People love our logo, and I actually had, there's a company out there called Teespring that basically lets you upload a design and create a store, like where you can sell merchandise. Somebody had created a MerchCat store, and I found that out by Googling MerchCat, and the store came up, and it wasn't any merchandise that I had created. I didn't give them permission. So, even at this stage, there is, if you have a good brand, people might try to steal it. Subscription revenue and subscribers are increasing. We do have traction, but it's not yet large enough to say, where it's self-sustaining. So, and I'm just being real about the process and what it actually takes. Nothing happens overnight. So you just have to keep working at what you're doing. But here's some of the emerging artists that have used MerchCat. It's just, this is just a handful of them. But there's, as you saw, we've had, over 2,000 account creations since we've started. So that wasn't enough for me, creating one app. Through speaking at panels and being out there talking to artists, I started to realize that, that 85%, artists need better ways to capitalize on that. So let's give, it's all about direct to fan and fan engagement, because if you know your fans and if you give your fans the access, they are your customer. So, let's expand and develop a fan app where fans can go in and buy merchandise directly at the show and pick it up at the merch table, or buy it before the show and pick it up at the merch table, or buy it after the show and have it shipped to home, or buy it at the show and have it shipped to home. So basically we're giving all of these ways for fans to continue to buy for those moments where you don't want to wait on the merch line. You thought you didn't want something, and you get into your car and you're like, oh shit, I really should have bought that t-shirt. Let's be able to capture the fan at all of those levels. So created MerchCat Fan. That launched in the third quarter of last year. This is what it looks like. So basically fans can buy on their phone. and do, all the ways that I said before. Their shows are listed in here so the fan can see if they have shows, but it's also an open marketplace. So if somebody goes into any of those menu options, artists or merch or shows, they're going to see every artist that uses the platform and all of their shows, every artist that uses the platform and all of their merch and all of the other artists. So it was also meant to be kind of a way for artists to expose an artist that has one fan base to another artist's fan base. And through that, we also have a way, if you see here, for the fan to get out and further explore the artist. We have their website, their Spotify, their YouTube, and their Instagram. So if you happen upon an artist that you've never seen before, you think their merch looks cool, you can get out and listen to their Spotify, see what they sound like, see if they have shows, watch their YouTube account. So, and these two apps talk to each other. So, a lot of what I've seen out there, there are issues with, okay, like we're selling, and we don't have an online platform yet, like that's just web-based. But, some people have their stuff in an online store and then they have their tour merch, and those two are not together. Like they don't know what they have here, they don't know what they have here. And so with our fan app, the inventory is tracked in one place, the fan data is captured, and the sales are tracked in one place. So if someone's using our platform, aside from just having a web store where people, like a Shopify or whatever, they can basically keep track of all of their data in one place. So, sorry, I'm just jumping around a little bit. So for our marketing and brand presence, like I said before, I didn't really go, how much time do we have? Okay, we have lots of time. So, we talked about branding for a second before, but with MerchCat, the brand was really important because I wanted to not be like QuickBooks or seem like an accounting program. I wanted to have a brand that kind of conveyed like we are for a creative, company, but we're also a service provider. So we went through the branding process with a creative director. And basically, I also said that I wanted the name to kind of be like your friend. So, Merch Girl wasn't going to work. But, they came up with the cat from, I used to jam with that cat back in the day. He's a cool cat. So that's what the cat is really in Merch Cat. It's not the meow cat. And so that brand has done a lot because, everywhere I go, I'm front and center with the brand on my shirt, all the conferences that I go to. And I did a lot of exhibits at conferences, had a table where people can come and get a demo of the app and see the platform. But what people remember is the brand. And when I talk to artists about creating their own merchandise, that is one thing that I go into in depth, because your brand is really what your fans or your audience, whatever it is, whatever kind of company or product you are, whoever you are, like that's what people are going to engage with and buy into your brand. So your brand should be able to like stand on its own or make sense with you standing next to it. It should always make sense. It should be cohesive. And that brand should be across all of your channels, like your website, your merchandise, and whatever other kind of thing, your business cards, everything that you're putting out there. It should be part of, your brand should be part of you and who you are. And so, we came out with a really strong brand. That's one kind of feedback that I've always gotten. Before I even had a product, people were like buying into MerchCat. And that's because of the branding. And I've spoken at and/or have exhibited at all of these conferences, probably more than once. I've been at like 24 industry events between 2015 and 2018, which brings me back to the importance of networking. I would not be anywhere near where I am if I had sat in my house and just tried to like let people know about MerchCat, or even, going back to when I was an artist manager. You have to put yourself out there and be seen, be present. Like in our time of, online everything and social media, like it's not enough. You can't, that doesn't replace the FaceTime, that you can have with somebody. David didn't find me in the phone book and say like, hey, do you want to come speak at the college? We ran into each other at a conference. He knew somebody that I knew. They were having a conversation. I joined the conversation, and then I got asked to come and talk to you guys. So, it happens that easy. It can happen that easy, but you have to put yourself out there. What else? So here with the marketing. So email list, I don't care whether you're an artist or you're a producer, you're a music business person, like your contacts, again, relationships, but you have to have an email list because you will meet people, they will want to know like what you're up to. And in order to keep in touch with them, it's really impossible to keep in touch with every single person that you meet. So you should have some kind of email list where you start to like build your contacts and your relationships and, use a database like MailChimp or something like that where you can easily send out, updates. Because nobody wants to get an email with like 500 CCs on it. And I still get those from artists sometimes. And I'm like, okay, now you just gave my email address to 500 other people. And I don't, so if you have to do it that way, blind CC everybody. But, a better way to do it is to just use some kind of email aggregator. And then obviously social media, it's like a blessing and a curse. We all love to hate it. It's time consuming, but I really do believe that you have to be present in at least one place prominently, and the place to be these days is Instagram. The highest viewed content is video. So that's always a good place to be at. If you're not comfortable with Instagram, then find something else that you like, but just make sure that you have an audience there. And I'm talking to the artist, I'm talking to everybody because like the first thing that people do, like I find, is they go and look for our Instagram account these days, like to try and find us. And then there's also Twitter and Facebook is, I've recently seen some people that are on there like constantly, like, and like these people are, I guess they're millennials, and it shocked me because I thought Facebook was kind of dying. But it just goes to show that, people are everywhere. And they do have platforms where you can, make one post and like put it out on multiple platforms. So, what was our marketing and growth strategy when we started and even now? I mean, it's basically all of the things that I mentioned. So sponsorships, exhibits, I mean, this is different for us because we have an actual product. If you don't have a product, you're not going to go exhibit or demo at an event, but you can attend a conference and just be present, talk to people, learn. Speaking engagements, workshops, and mentoring. Mentoring is something that I love doing. It's one of the reasons that I'm here today. I probably should go into teaching at some point just because I love it. I like being impactful. So those are the parts of this that I absolutely love. I don't love every part of being the founder of a music technology company. I'll just be honest about that. Working directly with managers and labels. We're also, partnering with other companies that need the data that MerchCat provides. User-based sharing, so, word of mouth from band to band, grassroots marketing, social media, and then, the educational videos is something that I'm thinking about doing because about 2 weeks ago, I did a workshop, which I've done about 5 times. I've done it at South by Southwest, the Music Business Conference. I did it at the not Millennium Music Conference, another small conference, and then just recently at Americana Music Fest. It's a 2-part merch workshop for artists because what I did also realize was that artists really don't have a clue. A lot of artists just don't know what to do when it comes to the merch process. Like, where do I start? Where do I go to get merch? Like, how do I decide what products to make? Like, what sizes do I order? That kind of stuff. And so, and then, you know, price points, creating a strategy with their merchandise, like making it more than just an afterthought, because a lot of artists, in my experience, wait till 2 weeks before they're going on tour to even start to think about merch. And because of what I showed you before, you know, and the money that can be made, it needs to be thought of as a business and attacked. Like as soon as they decide they're going on tour, they should start thinking about merch. So I teach all of these things in a workshop that I'm kind of bringing around. And I've been told I should do YouTube videos, I should do, you know, I should do webinars. And, you know, it's something that I'm definitely thinking about incorporating into our ecosystem. And then, you know, just word of mouth. In all of my speaking engagements, I was constantly being asked, you know, do you also make the merchandise? Because again, artists would like one place to go to, you know, where do I make the merch? Then how do I keep track of it? And then how can I engage my fans with it? So, you know, like everything else in business, it's very hard to find people that you want to partner with who have the same, you know, kind of vision and values that you do. I mentioned earlier about having good price points for artists, you know, keeping their costs down so that they can make the most money out of it. And I've seen too many screen printers sell a shirt to an artist that should have cost the artist like $7, and they're selling it to the artist for like $9 or $10 or even more. So that forces the artist then to either not, you know, make as much money as they could, or just to mark it up to a price that might not be attractive to fans. So, you know, we're trying to keep those prices down for artists. And, you know, I finally found a good screen printer that I like working with. We're working out the kinks because nothing is ever 100% smooth from the start. But, you know, once we have our process, you know, and I've been making merch for artists actually, you know, in a very loose way, like over the last 2 years. But we're planning to hard launch like the fact that we offer merchandise services to artists soon. And merch strategy consulting, you know, again, like what should we get? Will this design work? You know, like sometimes the designs are just not viable to people. Like you have to think about like what would a fan wear? Would somebody wear that? What would they wear it with? It's, you know, merchandise is actually, it's your fashion brand. It's your own merch retail line. And so, you know, I guess my crusade is, you know, kind of helping artists see that merchandise is a business and not just, you know, a kind of a small part of their process, and it should be approached as a business. And I know that that's, you know, it's a tough effort to get across, but I'm trying to, you know, through all of these things that we're doing, make it easier and more approachable for artists and actually give them a place to go to. So this was the workshop that I had mentioned 2 weeks ago at Americana Fest. I'm still getting follow-up emails asking for my slides, which is kind of amazing to me because, you know, we've always had a good reception, but not like always the kind of follow-up. Like these people are definitely like seemingly anyway interested in kind of retaining those details that I gave them and putting them into use. So let's see. Okay. You know, I know that I've talked about a lot and we'll have Q&A in a minute, but you know, my journey has been long. It's been complicated. You know, but for the first time in my life, like in the last few years, I feel like I'm actually doing what I was meant to be doing with my life. And I think that that's really important. It's a struggle that we all go through. I mean, when I first graduated from Pace, you know, with that accounting degree, and like none of the big firms were like interested in talking to me, I was kind of like, okay, you know, what did I do and where do I go from here? And like I went through a period of depression for a while, like which is not my personality at all, but I just kind of felt really, really lost. And then I found the job at the accounting firm and I just, you know, decided to stay the course. And, you know, like at this juncture, I could look back and say, okay, it was all part of the process. Like had I gotten into the music industry right out of school, I would not be able to have the impact that I'm having now, because like all of my education, all of my work experience, everything that I've done, all of the management in the old world, that being in that structured, regimented life of like accounting and private equity, like that all plays into what I'm doing now. And that's why I said to you before, like the path that you start out on may not be the path that you end up on. So don't ever like close your mind to the possibilities of like what can happen. And as you may have noticed, I'm a person who does not stand still and accept things that are not, what I want them to be. So, change and growth don't happen by standing still. You have to go out there and go after it, and if it doesn't work, then change your path, but like set a course, and when I say change your path, I don't mean like it doesn't have to be as drastic as what I did. I'm just talking about like in the small steps, like, what is your next step? Okay, I think I'm going to do this. You try it, it doesn't work, then you step back and you reassess, and then you figure out where you're going to go next. But nothing is ever a dead end. You kind of have to take the lesson and keep going, keep moving on with it. Network. I can't stress it enough. Like I said, I wouldn't even probably have a career in the music industry at all if I had not networked the way that I did. And sometimes it doesn't mean that you have to go and talk to everyone and be in everyone's face. Sometimes that means just being present and letting things happen organically. Like at conferences these days, like, people are always like, oh, do you have any meetings? Do you have da-da-da? And like, I actually try and leave myself open for like the natural stuff to take place, because, going to like having a conversation with someone like after a panel and they're like, oh, what are you doing next? Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm going to see this band. Okay. And you go with them. And then, like a lot of this industry too is about the hang. And I'm not talking about getting like shit-faced drunk every night. I'm talking about just spending time with people, like I said, getting to know them. And like, especially if it's somebody that you want to do business with, like kind of showing them that you're interested in who they are as a person and not just what they can do for you. So, network, be authentic, and just, let people know what you're doing. How do people know? I know that to a lot of us, sometimes they feel like, oh, I'm bragging. Oh, I'm talking about myself all the time. But if you don't tell people, how will they know? So you need to let people know like what you're doing, what you're aspiring to do. And, whether that be in conversation or on your socials, put it out there. If you put it out there, like the universe will answer, I promise. You have to pay attention though, like to when those things come your way and know when to capitalize on them. Because if you're not paying attention, you can miss things. And like, I'm being dead serious. Like, I'm not trying to sound like, but it's really, like I literally had times where I'd be like, okay, like my artist loved Rob Thomas from Matchbox 20. Okay. He wanted to play with Rob Thomas. I was sitting at my hotel in Atlanta and like, I went to my office there and I heard that Rob Thomas had played at the hotel that day. And like stuff, like crazy stuff like that has happened to me. I ended up meeting Rob Thomas's manager. I know him well. So like the line is there, but you have to, you have to recognize the opportunities when they come your way and try and capitalize on them when they come your way. Listen to your gut. If something's not feeling right to you, whatever it is, listen to your gut. When in building MerchCat, I had my first developers were absolutely horrible. Somewhere down the line, I had a feeling that things were not kind of going the way that they were supposed to, that they kind of, lied to me or were kind of bullshitting me. And, my business gut was telling me that, my intuition was telling me that. And I kept saying, well, building apps is not really my forte. Like maybe this is the way they do it in the tech world, maybe this is just the way that things are. But just because, and even if that is the way things are, doesn't mean that they're right. So, always listen to your gut. It's there for a reason. Don't be afraid to ask for advice or help. Like, don't think that you have to do everything on your own. Like, once you start building your network, reach out to people. The people who you build those relationships with will want to help you. I made one connection with somebody and she referred me to somebody else. And like, through that referral, like that person answered the email, and it goes like that. So once people start to buy into what you're doing and believe in you, they'll want to help you. And if they don't, then they're just not your tribe. Like, walk away. Don't harp on somebody forever. Like, it'll happen at some point or it won't. I say that, you have to give things time, especially in the music world. When I worked in commercial real estate, if I didn't answer somebody within 24 hours, my phone was ringing. We had to be that responsive. It is not that way in the music industry, which is something that I had to adapt to. I mean, I still personally try to adhere to being, a prompt responder to people just because I feel like it's courteous. But, in the music industry, someone may take 2 weeks to answer you, or they may take a month. It's okay to remind them. I actually wish people would remind me more now, but, not every day or after 20, I have an industry colleague who, if she doesn't hear a response from me in 24 hours, she's like, "Did you get my email?" And I'm like, "Yes, I had 9 million other things to do after your email came in." Like, there's a there's a fine line. Like, use your judgment, but the basis of it though is don't be afraid to ask for advice or help. Nobody who is where they are have done it alone. Lead with your strengths and ignore stigmas, even if you know they exist. So like I said to you, in my old firm, I knew that I was being ignored because I was a female. Well, the music industry is a man's world as well. I don't think it's to the same extreme, but I didn't enter the music industry kind of thinking, okay, I have to be, anything different than I already am because it's a man's world. Lead with your strengths goes to everybody. You have gifts, you have strengths, show people those first. And, for the females, you don't have to overcompensate. Just find the things that have gotten you places and lead with those when you go into any kind of endeavor. And just ignore the fact that you're a female. It's not a barrier. Don't let it be a thing. Exude confidence. Confidence is key in everything. If you're a person who, for whatever reason, lacks confidence, find ways to gain it, and I don't really know what the recommendations are for that. I don't even know where my confidence came from because I was very shy as a child. It just kind of developed over time. But, that's kind of a little bit of a fear, I think, and you just have to kind of address it head on. And, gain as much knowledge as you can, because I think that helps build confidence. If you know what you're talking about, if you know what you're doing, even if you don't know what you're doing, but if you know what you're talking about and, you can engage in a conversation with someone, that exudes confidence. Work hard. Nobody is handed anything in this life. You have to work for it. And, that's just the way it is. And if you think that people are handed things, you're wrong. Somewhere, some way, they worked for it. So work your ass off. You will succeed. Stay humble. Be kind. There's no reason for anyone to be nasty to anyone in this world. But, kindness, being likable, that's everything in this industry. If people don't like you, nobody's going to want to do anything with you. And you will, as big as this industry is, it's small. So, think about that before you go. I've met bands who have had a bad sound guy or a bad experience, and they're out on social media, ranting and raving and cursing out the venue. And don't do that stuff. It'll come back to haunt you in some way, shape, or form, I promise. And other people are going to look at you and go, yeah, I'm not dealing with them. They're a psycho, So just, likability, be kind, be authentic. People can see through phoniness. There's no reason to put on airs. If you have something to offer, people are going to buy into that. So just be you. And, make sure you say thank you and acknowledge people who help you. I find that most people do, but there are always those people who, and a lot of them are artists who you do stuff and they're and it's hey, I took time out of my busy day to do that one thing. Even if it's just a social media post, post back, thanks. It's not that hard. Take the time to just acknowledge the people who are helping you. Believe in yourself and your abilities. You're all here for a reason. You have some kind of talent or something that you're working on or working towards. Believe in yourself. And don't get overwhelmed by trying to see the whole staircase, like the end game. Like this whole thing is a journey. If you asked the girl in that schoolyard what I would be doing like 20 years from then or however long it's been, I would not have said this. So you just don't know. Like take it all one step at a time and just do your best along the way. And this is one of my favorite quotes by William Arthur Ward, and I started adopting this right around when I started opening the door to music, but one of my friends actually said, like, you actually, like, live that, you know? So find things that inspire you, and just when you start to get, like, you know, like feeling, like, uninspired or disenchanted by things, like, read those things again and remember what they mean to you. So that is it. Questions?
Well, we definitely want to thank you very much for all your time and talent and for your ability to explain the journey. Because we all do, and it's always great to have someone else besides us saying the same thing, so it's great. Let's do a little Q&A. Who's got some questions? Here we go. Take this.
So, yeah, I'm glad that you touched on the idea of having a one place where someone can get the merchandise and also manage the inventory. So, because I was going to originally ask if you were expanding to that, but you touched on that.
Yeah.
So the question was, so is this only catered to like musicians and bands, or could it be for other entertainers like comedians or filmmakers or anyone who might need have a use for this?
The person at the mall kiosk could use it. I mean, it's, you know, but my thing was I wanted to be impactful for artists in the music industry. So really anybody can use it. But, you know, as we grow, we're going to be adding more things that are just more, you know, particular to like an artist touring. But, you know, right now it's a pretty flexible platform. So, yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Evan. Nice to see
Hi,
everybody
Evan.
here. Nice to meet you. Thank you again. We always appreciate it. From
welcome.
your experience in recording studios, what would you say is one of the most important qualities an engineer or producer can have? Some of. You don't have to give one.
Well, so this is something that I kind of found that was limiting with my artist. He didn't have the ability to play more than one instrument, and one of the producers that was co-producing the record did not play more than one instrument. I don't know that he played any instrument, and therefore I felt like it was hard for him to hone in to the adjustments that could be made or should be made, and like I was hearing them in my head, like, but I took some guitar lessons, but like I couldn't explain in like music speak really like what I was hearing or where I thought it should go. And he was having trouble, and like my artist was getting frustrated, and you know, we had James Taylor's former music producer and keyboardist or something co-producing with a studio owner, and so the studio owner was kind of like limited in his input. So, you know, it was kind of like what, you know, yes, we're paying him, but like what is his actual like value add, you know? So I think that, you know, for them to have the ability to actually create sounds and know how to make adjustments creatively, like, and actually do it is important. Or if they want the artist to, you know, kind of do something specific instead of saying like, oh, you know, do this and speak, like the artist needs to understand technically like what to do, you know, if you're working with an artist that doesn't have all of those capabilities. So I would say that's really important, and just to listen, you know, I mean, we found that we went through, you know, and listen, artists are always going to want things done like a different way, or they'll listen to it the next day and be like, oh, that's horrible. You know, I want to go back and change this. Or, you know, like it's not just music artists, it's every artist. When I used to draw, it would never be done. You know what I mean? And if I looked at them now, I'd go back and do something else. But, you know, I think that the end game is like getting to a finished product is what the goal is. But, you know, I think that the producers and the engineers should be open to just also listen, giving the artist some credence for his desires,
That's why we constantly stress knowledge of music.
Yeah.
Music is very important. It's hard to just open up your computer and make beats and think that that's a producer.
Yeah.
You really kind of know and understand music. Hold on.
I don't know if he needs the microphone or maybe
Well,
he
we
doesn't.
have to record that.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you for saying branding like 25 times because we're doing that in the business class. And so my question about MerchCat
Yeah.
is you come up with this idea, and that's what as I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh my God, who's doing the printing? Who's connecting the app
Yeah.
to the merchandise? Who created the app? So not the specific things that you did, but you had an idea. I want to enable bands to sell merch, whether it's hat, T-shirts, wristbands, bumper stickers, a whole array of merch. Give them the opportunity to buy it, keep an inventory, and create an app. So how did you go? You have this great idea. What was the implementation from that MerchCat idea to the app to this, and then with the idea of you actually maybe becoming a manufacturer in the future? So what was that process like? Who did you go to? Like, how did you, like, kind of, in the small amount of time left, like, what was that process of, like, actually getting this going?
So it kind of all was happening at once. I was having the idea, and I missed in there that at the same time that my company was outsourcing us, I had recently parted ways with my artists. So now it was like, okay, I still want to be in music, still want to be impactful, but I don't think I want to do management anymore. And I had the idea. At the same time, I had, through my industry connections, had been working with, I don't know if you know who Mama Jan Smith is, but she's best known as the vocal coach for Justin Bieber. She's based in Atlanta. So I had met her. She kind of became like a little bit of a mentor to me. And she, because of all of her Bieber stuff, was like kind of looking for a manager. She was also in the process of creating a vocal app with a group of developers. And that's how I met the developers. So it was kind of there. And, the whole, it wasn't direct. It was just kind of this crazy, but it all came from my network, And then, through them, I met other people who, were involved in, the Atlanta music community is small. And so, other people who were doing stuff in Atlanta, I had an apartment there for a while. So I kind of, I went where the community was, but, as far as finding the developers, it kind of just came about through relationships that I had. Yeah.
Next question, anybody? Here you go.
So, my name's Aiden, by the way.
Hi, Aiden.
Can you describe, like, some trials that you went through in the app development process?
Oh, yeah. The first time, the second time, or the third time?
Any of them.
So the first time, basically the developers were charging me agency rates, which are like $150 an hour, and they were working out of their homes. And, my product had to be delayed because a tree fell on the engineer's house and he couldn't work for X amount of time, which should not have been my problem at $150 an hour. And they left me with a product that was broken. It didn't work 100%. I mean, on the face of it, the process worked, but there were things like if somebody had more than 50 items that they sold on the venue settlement sheet, it wasn't showing up. So it would say like, $1,000 at the bottom, but you would only see like 50 lines of data that added up to $500. And so it appears that it's not working properly. I spent all of 2016 fixing the stuff that they did wrong. So I had to pay for it again. So that was really hard because, that's how you run out of money as a startup, having to pay for things twice. And then when I developed the fan app, I had a great set of developers who I loved, and they totally they were a year late with the product. So timing to market is a huge factor when it comes to technology. And their team is based in India. My guy is in the US, and there were just a lot of language barriers, like, and miscommunications. That's not what caused the year delay. The year delay was that they got in over their head because they're like a corporate software developer. They're not mobile, like native iOS, volatile app type of environment. And so I think that they thought that they could do things and they really couldn't. And so, even though I vetted them, even though I used them before, because after the first experience, I was like, I'm not going through this again. I'm going to make sure that, I have people I trust, they know what they're doing. And I thought they knew what they were doing. And I was just like, how did I end up in this place again? And so, it's very difficult. And, and what's even worse is you go to other startup companies and they're like, oh yeah, that's normal. And I'm like, normal? Like, how do you live like this? Like, how do you, like it was, and the thing is, because I'm a bootstrap company, like I don't have a big corporation to like fall back on when things aren't ready, or I'm like waiting to, generate revenue from checks that I already wrote. So, I actually wrote a panel for SF Music Tech Summit that didn't get picked up, but it was, kind of like choosing developers, like who do you choose? Do you offshore? Is having a cheaper price point worth it if you have to do it 5 times or you have to wait an extra year for your product to be ready? So, these are all of like the challenges that come up. So anybody out there who thinks like, oh, I have an idea, I'll just create an app. Yeah, it's not that easy.
Do you have to do updates when the OS updates?
Oh yeah. I actually just got an email 2 weeks ago saying that whatever we built our web platform on, that Apple isn't going to support it anymore after a certain time. So any new updates that we do, we have to upgrade, and it's going to cost $1,500. So it's, you get these emails, like you think you're just rolling along for a minute, and it's like, oh, okay, this is broken, $5,000 to fix it, $1,000, and I have an app that costs $7.99 a month for artists. Like it's very stressful. It's but I still believe in what I'm doing, so I'm not giving up, despite the stresses. Somehow, it's that stuff happens, and then somebody calls you, or you get an email, and they're like, "Oh, this is great," like it helped me so much, and you're like, "Okay, this is why I'm doing this," and you keep going. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges related to development.
I got another question. Follow up. So, is there any like safety nets that you can put in place so that like when you approach a developer with your idea, there's like contingencies that they can't just take it and steal it and develop it themselves, or like develop it under a different brand or name or something?
Well, it's in your contract, yeah.
Okay.
Basically, the intellectual property becomes yours once you pay them, and that's written in the contract.
Let's hope you have it covered with the copyright and all before you start doing it.
Yeah.
Right?
And, full disclosure, like, it's not really usual for a startup to just be one founder, like, has no development experience, which was really what I was, and, I'm obviously getting my experience by doing, but it's, learning the hard way with things, because like my original developers never gave me wireframes. Like those things show the exact process that's going to occur in the app. Had those things happen, they actually didn't confer with me at all. And so the second time with the fan app and every other development sprint we've done, I make sure, like, I put the fear in my developers, and, they ask me, sometimes I'm just like, oh, why are they asking me that? But they're like, we're not doing anything without asking you first. So I had to kind of become the CTO as well as, the CEO of the company, because I can't afford to pay anyone right now. Yeah. And, to bring somebody else in at this juncture, like as a technical co-founder, it's kind of like, I've done all the work already. Like, why, unless that person wants to come in and like take it from here and not get paid and just get equity, then, that's something else to discuss. But it's really hard when you don't have like outside funding and don't have like a full team and you're doing everything yourself. So, I'm kind of like a DIY artist,
Any other questions? All right, well, I'd like to thank Vanessa, everybody.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you're going to stick around a little bit, so if anybody wants to have an individual conversation, plus you have,
I have
business
cards,
cards
yeah.
here and all that stuff. Okay, so before you leave, an announcement. We're going to have Sandy Gennaro here Monday at noon. He's played with Cyndi Lauper, Joan Jett. He's done all kinds of drum sessions. He has a great motivational speak. He's been in the business forever. I'm going to pass a couple of these out now, and we're going to promote it, and that's next Monday at noon. And as you can tell, the way our master classes are going, I would suggest getting here early. So once again, Vanessa, thank you, dear.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Thank you.